While the tales of Tevat's history have always had a strong foundation in Mondstadt and Liyue, and of course to a slightly lesser extent Inazuma, Sumeru has its own window onto the past to offer us, so that we can continue weaving upon that rich tapestry. New light has been shed on old stories we've long pondered over in brand new and unexpected ways, so we've decided to bring you some insight through the stories attached to the newest crafted weapon series introduced with 3.0.
The Aranara are long-lived creatures who have the very memory of the trees at their disposal. Though their tales come off as fantastical and sometimes difficult to understand, their long and deeply rooted memories may be able to give us new perspectives on stories we've already heard elsewhere in Tevat. We've tried to organize these in what we assume is vaguely their chronological order to make the stories' connections a bit easier to follow.
After all, Aranara are not exactly the best at making the flow of time something that we humans can comprehend. But what's better than Aranara story time? Get some nice herbal tea, maybe take some time for cooking training, and enjoy the tales of our favorite little forest folk. I'm Ganymede.
And I'm Psyche. We will be your guides to the Aranara weapon series, and the tales it has to tell. Oh, and never forget, the forest will remember. Obviously, this series is one of the newest released. There will be story spoilers up to and including the 3.2 Archon quests, as well as the Aranara world quests.
Moon Piercer. The first weapon we're going to cover is the spear, as its description seems to be the one that references the earliest events in Tevat, dating back to Tevat's prehistory. It reads as follows. This story is about all the children who are fascinated by the moonlight. Sometimes, when looking at the solitary moon, the children would mourn just as the last king of the forest did as he was dying. Another legend says that if you drink water reflecting the full moon from a pool within the footprint of the forest king, you will become the king's attendant. The tale of the moon goes like this. The story came from a very ancient dream, one that was hidden in a Nilotpala lotus. Long before Arama Hakunda had been born from the pomegranate and before a great and noble race and your ancestors walked the earth together, there were once 3 sisters. When night came, they would leave the pearl-colored palace to roam the desert, and Nilotpala lotuses would bloom at their feet.
Ultimately, 2 moon wheels shattered into dust and disappeared. The last of the sisters was so overcome with sorrow that she would never leave her palace again. After a long time, the moon debris finally fell to the earth. At that time, the god of vegetation had already brought the forest to the desert lands. Where the dust of the moon fell, the Nilotpala lotuses bloomed, and those children who breathed in the dust will have a pearl-like moon in their hearts. This is why there are always children who are confused by the moon, and the reason why the Nilotpala lotus blooms every night, and why the moon always favors these children. Because the 3 sisters who mirror each other long to be reunited.
The Nilotpala lotus withered after telling this story. She had waited long enough for the desert to become a jungle and for the great race to be dethroned. Long enough for us to appear on the earth, and for the Aranara who told me this story to appear before her and speak to her. That Aranara lost many, many more memories time and time again, until Vanarana was destroyed and we entered a dream. But that is just as well, for the story of the moon will grow into a pearly moon in our hearts as well as yours. Children fascinated by the moon will weep when they gaze upon it, for the moon has turned into fine sand and entered their eyes. In countless tales, not a single tear will be in vain.
The story of the 3 Moon Sisters is one that we generally count among the tales of prehistory mythology for Tevat, if only because it's one of the few tales that is mentioned in every region so far, and with surprisingly consistent details. Whereas other reoccurring myths, I'm looking at you, Sun Chariot, might have greatly conflicting details in their legends in different regions from different times. This reiterates the story most of us lore nerds already know well.
Once, there were 3 moons in Tevat, and the one we see now is the corpse of one of the 3. This gives us a bit of information we didn't necessarily have before. Generally, it's been stated that the 3 drivers of the moon chariot ended up turning on each other and killing each other after the calamity that befell the Seelie race. This version, however, says that it was 2 of the 3 sisters that killed each other, and the third returned to her palace to never emerge again. Perhaps the moon of Tevat isn't a corpse at all, but the ghostly moon palace where the third sister hides away in her endless sorrow.
This also tells us the intriguing fate of the other two moon sisters, that they shattered into dust and rained down upon the earth. It also suggests that children are particularly in tune to this remnant of the sisters. Perhaps it's just a colloquial belief in Sumeru, but who knows what that could mean. Maybe it's just a retelling, as many myths in the real world are, but we all know Hoyoverse likes to hide things that are important in those little details. It also mentions a great race that was dethroned, and at first glance, I assume this is most likely a reference to the Seelie race specifically, but could very well be in reference to something we don't know anything about at all, or maybe something to do with the primordial one's time at the birth of Tevat as we know it.
The Sapwood Blade. The next story talks about the divine Sumeru trio, Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, King Deshret, and the Goddess of Flowers, whose name we do not yet know. It reads as follows. This is a story from Veluca. This is a story from many moons ago, when the jungle was still a shining desert of gold, and we had not yet been born from the pomegranates. There were once 3 friends. They were as good a group of friends as Araji, Aramaha, and Arayama, but one of the friends returned to the earth, while the remaining 2 went their separate ways. One was determined to create a kingdom on Earth and cause all sorrow to disappear, while the other decided to spread vegetation and greenery and fill the land with wisdom and happiness. But eventually, kingdoms will fall, wisdom will be distorted, and the definition of happiness will change. You will forget your dreams while we recoil back to ours, forgetting the sun and moon. Even so, in the depths of the desert, just as the kings of the forest leave footprints behind and you and I leave stories behind, the traces of our past friendship are said to slumber quietly, like an Aranara that has transformed into a seed.
This story is established pretty well in the 3.0 and 3.1 Sumeru Archon quests. It reiterates what we already know, that the Goddess of Flowers perished and her loss affected King Deshret and Greater Lord Rukkhadevata so deeply that their friendship was never the same, and they parted ways to pursue their different ideals. As suggested in the weapon description for Cyno's signature weapon, the Staff of Scarlet Sands, King Deshret seems to have turned against Celestia's order and began to seek forbidden knowledge, perhaps as a way to rebel against them, much like the Tsaritsa in Snezhnaya is doing right now.
The description is rather long, so I'll only read one excerpt that is most relevant to the subject here. The cycle of 7 must be removed, because the secret narrative will be blocked. Fear and grief must be torn down, so the barrier between life and death must be removed. Remove the sun, the moons, and wait, for there should be no barriers between time and space. Remove the original principles of rules, verdicts, and grace, so that she will no longer be afraid of the punishment that is laid on her kin. Remove birds, beasts, fish, dragons, humans, and the 7 Monk Kings, so that none shall steal wisdom.
This makes me think that King Deshret's glimpse of forbidden knowledge, combined with his grief at the loss of the person he cared most about, drove him to want to see the very foundations of the world unmade, as if that might be the only way to escape Celestia's draconic laws and punishments. It also hints that perhaps the Goddess of Flowers' loss was in response to a breaking of these laws, as he seems to want to undo everything so that she will no longer be afraid of the punishment that is laid on her kin.
The Forest Regalia. The Claymore, the Forest Regalia, tells us a different story about a figure from Sumeru's past that we've not heard much about outside of what these weapons tell us. This is the tale of the enigmatic king of the forest, called Tiger. The forest used to be a giant maze many, many moons ago. The last king of the forest had returned to Sarva, leaving one who once waited upon him to inherit the name Tiger. In the past, whenever there was shade, there was the domain of the forest king, and as he wandered through his own territory, the birds and beasts that depended on the jungle would bow their heads as he passed by to show their respect and reverence. All kings had their own palaces. As each successive king of the forest took the throne, the forest changed according to his image and vision. The palace of the last king of the forest was hidden behind a fence of trees and vines, and beyond a network of water and cliffs. It is the disk of pearls made by moonlight through leaves on still water. The king was at the water's edge, basking in the twice and much moonlight all by himself. Thus did the forest maze come about. Legend has it that the forest king traced the path of a maze in his dazzling, dappled stripes. Each generation of kings' palaces piled on top of each other so that the paths would intertwine from tree to tree. Streams would break off or would give birth to new branches. The forest paths growing ever more complex, only the forest king, we Aranara, and the people from the king tree's sanctuary could freely go into the forest king's sanctuary and find their own way from tree to tree and stream to stream.
Later, the last king of the forest died protecting the forest. The forest would make no new palace, and the maze would disappear henceforth. Or perhaps it was a dark herd of beasts that, like a hurricane, brought down the trees like waves of wheat. Either way, the maze was dead, and so was the forest king. The Aranara who gave me this story was very timid and did not want us to hear him sing, always seeking a place of solitude. One night, he went through a maze in the forest and found a bright reflection of the moon in the water. Thus did he hear the story of the last king of the forest. Then the current changed, and the moon's reflection was scattered. Much has changed, and yet much still remains the same. But even if you, like me, have never met a king, you would still get the impression that Tiger was a noble and powerful king of the forest.
At first, I thought we really know next to nothing about this forest king. But after doing some digging, I realized that he has actually been mentioned before. In fact, the lore he's mentioned in was part of something released in the 1.0 version of the game. But we'll get to that later. He's presented as an actual historical figure, and where the Aranara are concerned, they may sometimes sacrifice their memories in exchange for the use of their powers, but those memories return to Irminsul and the forest itself. That being said, their accounts can generally be trusted to be historically accurate in ways that other things cannot be. However, since we've seen that Irminsul itself can be drastically altered, maybe we can't trust anything anymore.
Okay, that's too mind-bending to think about now. The point is that the Forest King and his lineage definitely existed, and it seems to have perished like so much else when the calamity of 500 years ago swept the forest. The only question I have is why he didn't come up when that subject was discussed quite a bit in the main Archon quest. Maybe we'll learn more about this Tiger King in the future?
The King's Squire. This bow's description tells us more about the King of the Forest, as well as introducing his squire. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Cinnamon, and with the tiger by her side, she left the palace once and for all. The end. But this tale belongs to your kind. In your stories, everything always has a deeper meaning. I understand that this palace is everything that makes Cinnamon human. Others who share the same bloodline, a more than spacious living place, common sense, and life lessons, while the king was the wish lurking and growing in her mind like moonlight. Yet for us, a palace is a palace, Cinnamon is Cinnamon, the Forest King is the Forest King, and moonlight is just the moonlight. The story I heard is at variance with the story of Cinnamon. Once upon a time, there was a child who lost her way in the forest. Following the footprints left by the Forest King, she stepped into the tiger's garden. Grrr! Be it birds or beast, my stomach bids everyone welcome while the earth awaits their return. I am the king of the forest, I slaughter and I foster. Only a puny human like you have I yet to sample. So said the tiger. However, the child hadn't yet forgotten your language, and naturally, she couldn't understand the king. Grrr! The child imitated.
The Forest King was amused. Usually, when he spoke, your kind would hide in their wooden houses, and beasts would lie on the ground, not daring to move even an inch, and birds would fly away towards the sun. Even those Rishbalan tigers, mighty as they may appear, would hide themselves in the bushes. Grrr! A tiny outsider who does not understand etiquette. All right then, let me teach you all about the forest, and its language you shall learn. From now on, you are my squire. This forest will forever be open to you, and all beings here can do harm to you no more. Remember, this world is but a dream of the forest. One day you shall awake from your reality and find your place in this boundless hunting ground. Where our prey head without fail, we shall arrive at one day as well. Always keep that in mind. There will always be a new king to inherit the seat from his predecessor. The circle of life applies to you, to us, and to every being in the forest just the same. Before the squire met her fate together with the king, a lost child stumbled into the palace without scrunching a single fallen leaf. She passed on her knowledge to the child, just as this story was passed on to me. That child passed on the teachings to the children who came after. Later, some children became the guardians of the forest, passing on the forest's language and the responsibility of protecting the king's land to their future successors. And others, when they gazed upon the great agony that others suffered, decided to bid farewell to the hunting ground and become hunters who would terrify even the most vicious beasts.
While this story comes off at first as almost just a children's tale, the last bit is connected to another enigmatic figure, the Queen of Hunters, who gives the Viridescent Venerer artifact set its name. This artifact set was released in 1.0, so really, we've known about the King of the Forest for some time.
Viridescent was raised by him, as it seems all of his squires were raised, and didn't even know human language before setting out. His squires took a vow to never fight for human reasons, and only for survival. But the calamity upended that way of life. Viridescent encountered a blind boy dying from wounds inflicted by abyssal beasts. She chose to take up his bow, made of Irminsul branches, the Hunter's Path, Tagnari's signature weapon, and fight the beasts of the abyss for his sake. She set out for this nameless boy's vengeance, slaying countless abyss beasts as they swept the lands after the fall of Conria. Unfortunately, their corrosive blood eventually turned her into a twisted monster herself. Her final fate was decided by the Bloody Knight from the Bloody Chevalier artifact set, who mistook her as just another abyss beast on his journey and killed her.
The Fruit of Fulfillment. This story is attached to the catalyst of the series and reads as follows. In truth, the moon did not always look like a pearl. That was a story from a long, long time ago, a dreadful story. Fortunately, it is just a story, not some memory of mine or yours. Once upon a time, the moon turned into the shape of fangs that smirked ferociously. Moonlight no longer waltzed through the leaves to cast itself onto the grass, turning the dew into glimmering pearls. Trees were thrust down to the ground like wheat overwhelmed by strong winds. Every inch of the land was swamped by grief. The grief was so formidably immense and intense that even the streams were fraught with the pungent odor of salt and iron. Our creator, Queen Aranara, trusted us with the forest. We thus embarked upon the battles against the monsters that emerged from the darkness, colossi made of iron and steel, and Marana. She entered the desert with the forest children. They burnt the roots of disaster and tore the branches of calamity, but only a few of them eventually made it back to the embrace of the shade of the trees. We lost Vanarana, and too many Aranara returned to the ground before their time. Even the story that survived was bitter and agonizing, but we defeated the calamity in the end. Even in the deepest sea of sand, the lotuses still bloomed. She who created us had once again created new life to mend the land's hollowed heart. Courage and strength still ring out amidst the most bitter of tales. No story is as powerful as memories, but they empower nevertheless. I will cherish the stories you handed to me, stories of our adventure. Should calamity ever recur and the moon mutate, these stories will protect the forest on your behalf.
At first glance, one might assume that this covers the calamity of Conria from 500 years ago, but this story is actually much older than that. You see, Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, known as Queen Aranara to the Aranara, actually battled the dark mud and forbidden knowledge more than once. The first upsurge claimed the life of the goddess of flowers and set King Deshret on his dark path. But first, Rukkhadevata sacrificed a large portion of her power to stymie the effects of the corruption and save King Deshret's life. In doing so, she experienced her first regression, and came to take the form that we now recognize as nearly identical to Nahida's appearance. It is most likely that this coincided with the Archon War, leaving Rukkhadevata as the sole remaining god able to rule in Sumeru as the desert region fell further into chaos.
The mention of colossi of iron and steel leads us to believe that Khaenri'ah was already hostile towards Sumeru in particular, and that this battle was hard won for the Nation of Wisdom. Why the Aranara fought against not only abyssal beasts but also the people of Khaenri'ah's automatons at this time is unclear, though the records left behind at the two colossal ruin guards suggest that they too were fighting abyssal beasts. The other possibility is that I'm reading the timeline wrong here entirely, and all of this did in fact occur during the calamity that originated in Khaenri'ah 500 years ago, and the mutated moon is just a new fact for us to add to the pile. This is a mystery we need more information to unravel, and will hopefully come from future updates as we get to explore more of Sumeru. Here we find another little thread woven into the greater history of Teyvat through the weapons imbued with their stories. I hope that these tales have given you further insight to the bigger picture of Teyvat's rich history as you continue your own journey as the traveler. This is the Hexen Zirkel, signing off.
We hope you'll join us on our next adventure.